Hello everybody and welcome to the tutorial series for the Animal Behavior Kit. In this tutorial we'll be taking a look at several different environment blueprints that we are going to add to our level. So if we go to the second slide here, we'll be taking a look at the food and the food spawner blueprints, the water blueprint, the bounding box, waypoints, paths, and eventually points of interest. So if we go ahead and jump to Unreal, the first thing we'll do is we're going to take a look at the food. And like I mentioned before, I know this is a lot of setup, but the reason we're doing it in this order is once we finally add the AI to the level, everything else will already be there, including the food, the water, etc. So it will be very easy for us to test all of the different behaviors. So if you go to the top level under ABK, go ahead and click on Blueprints, go under AI, go under Actors, Ground AI, Need System, and you'll see that there's a blueprint called Bpai AI Food. And if you drag it to the level, we're going to press F to focus. You'll see that this is just a volume, and it's called AI Food, and you can put it anywhere in your level. And if you click play, basically this is going to be hidden. If you have it selected, if you go under the details panel under setup, you can see that you have a bound scale. You can change the bounds to encapsulate the mesh that's going to be the actual food. You have the marker, which is visible. The marker says volume here, so if you don't want it visible, you can turn it off. And if you want it hidden in game, it's already hidden in game. And if you don't want it hidden in game, you can deselect this. So when you're setting up your game, if you want to actually look at the food volume to test your AI, you can deselect mark hidden, and it'll automatically take it out. And you can actually see it. But right now, as a default, it's going to be visible in your level and hidden away. Now, the way I usually set it up is that I have these little bushes to be the food, right? So I can grab my food blueprint and I can line it up with this bush. And if I turn it invisible, just want to make sure that everything's lined up. And that way, when my deer, we're going to be using deer for most of our testing. When the deer gets hungry and it comes for the food, you'll actually see the deer come and try to eat this little bush here. So you can do that manually. You can go ahead and clone this blueprint, and you can set it up everywhere. But there is an easier way, especially if you're using foliage, which is, I think, the use case for most people. So you could do it manually, but imagine trying to do it for every single bush that you see here. It's going to be quite the task. So I do have a separate solution for you. So go ahead and delete this, and we're going to, actually we can keep it here for now. If you go back to AI, so go back up in the hierarchy, go back to AI, and go into the spawners folder. Go ahead and drop the Bpai food spawner, and this is a utility blueprint. You can drop it in your level, and with it selected, you can see that there's several things here under setup. You say there's a actor tag, and by default is AI food. You have two options: use static meshes and use foliage. And then you have some kind of empty array here. And you see that you have several different options here: get foliage, info, spawn food, and delete. So we're going to use foliage to spawn our food. So what we're going to do is, for the actor tag is AI food, just notice that. I'm going to click on my foliage and notice that all of the foliage in my level is now selected. There's nothing really selected here, but if you go under details, you'll see that you are actually selecting something. So if I go here and search for tag, now you can actually add an actor tag to your foliage. And the tag is going to be AI food, the same as you had right here. Okay, so once you add the tag to the foliage, you can go back to Food Spawner VP and you can click on Get Foliage Info. And what you'll notice is as soon as you do that, this array was now populated and has two different items. So go ahead and expand the foliage meshes. And now you'll see that you have two separate meshes here, SM Pine Tree and SM Bush. And these actually correspond to these two separate meshes, right? So my blueprint goes through your foliage and gives you a separate line item for each individual foliage type. So in this case, we have pine tree and bush. So in your level, you may have 5 different types of trees or bushes or whatever. And it doesn't really matter, you're gonna get a list here of all of the different meshes that were found in the foliage. And you'll notice that this is actually a map. Next to the name, there's gonna be a little tick box here. And this tick box basically means that you will spawn food on that foliage category. So we're going to first deselect use static meshes. We're going to take that off. We're only going to use foliage. And in our case, we only want food to spawn on the bushes. So we're going to deselect pine tree and only have SM bush selected. And now when we click on spawn food, notice that every single bush in your level now has a food blueprint. How cool is that? This can be a huge time saver if you're using foliage, right? So remember, you can do it manually by dragging the food blueprint, or you can use this little helper blueprint here to spawn your food on all of the different foliage meshes that are in your level. You can also delete the food if you say, oops, I made a mistake. I actually want the food to be on the pine trees instead. You can do that, and you can see that it now spawns under each individual tree. So you can always delete it if you make a mistake. Just make sure that you have the tag on your foliage, and then you select which foliage type will receive food and click on spawn food. It's as simple as that. Now you have food on every single bush. So you can go ahead now and delete the food spawner. We don't need it anymore. Right now we have our food in our level. And before we move on, let's go ahead and put the food in its own separate folder here. And actually we're going to delete this one here. This is kind of a random volume. So grab all of the food that was just spawned in your level, which is quite a bit. Select it all, right click, move to, and I'm going to move it to a new folder, and I'm going to call it food. There we go. Keeping things tidy. I'm going to move the landscape and the nav mesh also to components, and the nav mesh recast also to components. And the water, let's move the water to its own folder, and we're going to call this water. And again, you don't have to do this, but I like to keep things real tidy. So all of the food blueprints are now here under one folder, and the water blueprints are going to be here. All right. So if we go back to our PowerPoint, we used this food spawner and spawned all of our food. Now we want to make sure that we use the water. So right now we have this lake, and it can be anything. Could be a body of water, could be a lake, could be a river, could be anything. But if you look at the nav mesh, if you press P, you'll notice that the nav mesh includes everywhere, including under the river, right? So right now, if you did nothing else, your AI may be able to come underneath the river, right? If your AI is here and is trying to get to this location here, is going to pick the quickest way possible, then your AI will actually come under the river and come out here to this location. And there are several different ways that you can prevent that. You could use blocking volumes to block the AI from coming here. But the problem is that it's actually a rectangular volume. What happens if you have a really complex shape? Like in this case, you could probably do it. But if you have a lake or a river that is like a very odd shape, right, is going all over the place, how can you then have a volume at the bottom of the river or the body of water that will prevent your AI from going there? So my solution was to create a blueprint that you could encircle the body of water, and it would automatically spawn all of the blocking volumes around the body of water to prevent the AI from going there. If you do it manually, it's very, very tedious. So I did the legwork for you, and I created this blueprint. So if you go back to AI, go under Actors, Ground AI, Need System, and you have Bpai Water. And we're going to drop this guy right here. You can pick any corner. I'm gonna drop it right here. And you'll notice that we have a spline, right? So we are going to rotate this towards the water around here. And remember that the goal of this blueprint is you are going to use this spline to circle the body of water to prevent the AI from going inside the body of water. But also this spline is going to be used for the AI to know where the water is. So when you use the need system and the AI gets thirsty, it'll know exactly where to go because you'll use this blueprint to encircle the water. Okay? So right now, as you put the blueprint here, it can be above the ground, doesn't have to be close to the ground. You'll see that there are several different utilities here. The first thing we'll do is we're going to click on Show Floor Guide. And you'll notice that now we have these little guides here. And this is going to show us where in the world the actual blueprints will be, the blueprint nodes will be. So grab the first one. Make sure you're under local space, by the way. Grab the first point, and we're going to drag it. And notice now that we can see, just based on this, where our spline will be. So go ahead and click on Alt and drag, and you're going to create another point and use the guides to get as close to the water as possible. And because this is a tutorial, I'm not going to spend too much time going through and making this shape perfect, but I do want you to understand the purpose of the blueprint. So as you're going through, you can duplicate the blueprint on the spawn points in the spline, and you're going to encircle the water. When you're doing it for your game, make sure that you do it carefully, because the more detail, the better it will be, right? So the more spline points that you have, the better shape you'll be able to use to encapsulate the body of water. In this case, I'm being a bit careless because, again, I'm just trying to show you the point of how to use this blueprint. But there you go. I do want you to, again, for your own game, take your time. There you go. And then when you get close, very, very close to the beginning, go here under Setup and click on Closed Loop, and see that now everything is closed. Notice again, if you go to the edge, all of the different pointers here are giving you an idea of where the actual blueprint will be, where the actual blockers will be. So use this to align your spline as close to the water as possible. So for example, if you say, hey, this point right here is a little too far, I need it to be closer, click on the spline, and then you can move it a little bit closer. And you can see here that it's now moving closer to the edge. All right, take a quick look at everything. For example, this one is a little too far. Click on the spline point and get closer. This one can be a little closer as well. So click on the spline point and move it a little closer. There you go. Once you're done, go ahead and click on Hide Floor Guide. We're going to save. Then we are going to ground the spline points. And now the entire spline is going now to the ground. And notice that the spline points are exactly where we select what we had the floor guide. And lastly, we are going to click on Spawn Nav Blockers. And now notice how we already have navigation blockers right now that are spawned all around our body of water. So now when the AI tries to come from this area to this area, it'll realize that it cannot pass this blocker, so it'll actually go around the river or around the body of water, right? So that's the reason why we're doing it this way. The spline allows us to create any custom shape, and notice that the blockers are automatically adjusted in between each spline point, right? So between two spline points, the blocker will be there. So the more spline points, the more detailed your shape will be, and the smaller these blockers will be, allowing you to have the best shape possible. If you click on P, you'll notice that right here, you'll notice that we still have a nav mesh here at the bottom. However, look at here at this edge. As you can see here, this blocker is automatically breaking the nav mesh all around this lake, which means that the AI will now not be able to go under the river. And that is the whole point of the blockers. All right. Very good. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. We've done the food and the water. Now let's take a quick look at how we can use a bounding box. And this is actually very simple, guys. I know we spent a little too much time here. But right now, if you drop your AI in the world, it could go anywhere that the nav mesh is available. And that's great. But you also have the option of limiting your AI to a specific area. And that's what the volume is all about. So if we go back to ground AI, so one level up, go into navigation, and you'll see that the first blueprint here is Bpai AI bounding box. And if you drop this to your level, it's like this tiny little volume here, and we are going to make it bigger. So go into bound scale, and let's make this, I don't know, 50 by 100. There you go. And we're gonna keep this right here. There we go. And this area is just a volume, and you can assign the AI to just be, let's make this a little bit bigger, like 150. There you go. So it's like this entire side of the level. They're constrained to this side here only. And we're going to clone this, and we're going to add another area here, and let's make this 100. So it's a bigger area here. There you go. All right. We're going to use this later, but basically these are specific areas for your AI to be around. So if you wanted to confine your AI to a specific area that is a subset of the navigation mesh, this is how you would do it. This is also interesting because if you have a massive world like a biome and you have different areas, you could have all of your AI bounded by a specific area. So this is how you would segment the AI, right? If you have a snowy area, you want to make sure that specific animals are stuck in that area, you would use the volume here. Okay, let's go back here. Waypoints. Here's another blueprint called Bpai Waypoint. Let's go ahead and drop one of these guys here. Very tiny blueprint. All this is as it sounds, it's just a waypoint in the world that the AI can use as a form of navigation. So a waypoint is basically just a little point in space in your level that the AI can leverage. So one of the movement modes is going to be go to a random waypoint. So if you wanted to use that mode, you can scatter waypoints in specific key areas in your level, and then the AI will move between those waypoints in a random way, right? That gives you more control than simply saying pick a random location within the volume, because then it's completely unpredictable. The AI can go anywhere. But if you had in your level specific points of interest where the player will be, right, like camps or riverbanks or whatever, you could add waypoints around those areas to always make sure that the AI will be there, right? So we're just going to scatter some waypoints, and it really doesn't matter where you put these waypoints. So I'm just going to clone some waypoints, and you can scatter them everywhere. I'm gonna put another one here, and you can put them inside this volume, by the way. They can literally be anywhere. I'm gonna put one here and another one here. All right, and let's go ahead and do some organization here. Let's do all the water, Bpai water, move it to the water folder, and then all of the blockers, water blockers, I also want to move them to the water folder. So all of these guys, right click, move to water. And then you have the AI bounding box and the waypoints. Let's go ahead and move all this stuff into its own folder, and we're going to call it navigation. There you go. Again, keeping things really tidy. Okay, so we've done bounding box, we've done waypoints. Let's do a path real quick. And we're going to do one right here just for demonstration purposes. And you can see we have a blueprint called Bpai path. So grab this and drop it in your level right here. We're going to start from one end and go to the next. And right here, you'll notice this is again a spline. So you can drag it a little bit higher just for easing purposes. Click on the spline and then you can drag it. And what you're going to do is create a path by duplicating the different spline points. So I'm going to simply press Alt and create another spline point, and I'm going to move it around. Alt and drag and create another spline point. Alt and drag. And as you do this, you are going to be creating different points for your AI to follow. There you go. And we're gonna leave it right there. And this blueprint, like you see here, is just again a spline that defines a path that the AI will follow. Now, what's important to understand here is that what this blueprint will do is actually spawn waypoints on every single point in the spline. And the AI will go from waypoint to waypoint in the exact order of the spline. So with this selected, we are going to then click, once we're done with the path, click on Event Place Waypoints. And notice now that you have waypoints that have now spawned right here at level. At the location of the spline points. So if you want a very detailed path with a lot of curves, you want to make sure that you have as many spline points as you need. If you need to delete them, you can click on Event Delete Waypoints and it'll just delete them. And we can just go ahead and move this down a little bit here and click on Place Waypoints. All right. So the AI will go from waypoint to waypoint. Whoops. And you can see here that this was this is under the, hold on, let's go ahead and delete it and go back. This was under the terrain. So if we click on place waypoints, it'll go ahead and place them again on the floor here. So make sure that your path is actually above the ground, otherwise you'll have issues. Okay, click on save all, and now we have random waypoints scattered around the world. We have a path that is actually several waypoints in sequence. We have 2 bounding volumes that the AI can use. And finally, we're going to add a point of interest, a POI. And we're going to add it here. So go ahead and drag Bpai POI. And this is again another volume that is going to act as a point of interest that is used in another navigation mode. So let's go ahead and scale this to, let's see, 50 by 20 perhaps. Yeah, we can kind of move it here. And we're going to leave just one waypoint here, one point of interest here. All right. There we go, guys. I think we have everything set up. In the next video, we're actually going to drop our very first AI pawn in the world, and we are going to start using all of these different blueprints that you see here that we now have taken the time to set up. So thank you guys for being patient, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks a lot.